Holy crap, folks, we just got some big news to talk about. With the Rangers not really playing the greatest over the last couple of weeks, we've heard some rumors about the future of this Rangers team, and specifically Elliotte Friedman talking about which big players could be dealt. It seems like the Rangers are trying to shake up this roster a lot, and that could include some of the biggest players on the team. So what trades could we see around this Rangers squad? Which players are most likely to get dealt, and what could those deals look like for New York? Well, make sure you watch till the end as we go through every single trade rumor, and hit that subscribe button if you're new for more hockey content just like this all throughout the year, presented by BetUS. Speaking of, today's video is sponsored by BetUS, the place to play throughout this hockey season. All you guys gotta do is use code YouTube150 when you sign up, and you'll get an 150% sign-up bonus on your first deposit and 125% sign-up bonus on your next two deposits after that. But you have so many options with them. You can go through, of course, every NHL game. But if you're feeling the Rangers, if you're still hopeful in them, you can bet on them to win the Stanley Cup right now at plus 1,000 odds. And also for a team to record 100 plus points this season, they're right now at minus 275. A lot of options though at BetUS, and that is the place to be throughout this hockey season. Now let's get into the potential moves for this Rangers team, because things have been getting ugly real fast. You look at it, and the record right now isn't the worst thing in the world. In fact, if they were in a worse division, I think they'd be a lot better off. Right now at 12-6-1, but they've lost their last two games, and just in general, it seems like the Rangers vibes just haven't really been there. And in the wake of that, we got a big bombshell from Elliotte Friedman, none other than the Friedman himself, talking about the situation, saying in the aftermath of their 6-2 loss in Edmonton on Saturday, which was really quite brutal, the Rangers have made it very clear they are interested in making moves and shaking up their roster. Among the names indicated are Chris Kreider and Jacob Trouba, although other options will be considered. And this is huge for so many different reasons. For a lot of Rangers fans who have been discontent with the team so far, especially with their recent performances. I mean, Elliotte Friedman mentions that 6-2 loss to Edmonton. That was one of the worst games I've seen the Rangers play with this current team over these last few seasons, which they've had some bad games here and there, but that one was really embarrassing. It just didn't feel like a lot of that team was really in it and actually had their heads in the game. And I think that really is going to be sparking a lot of change here coming soon. But I think it's important to note that not only is Friedman giving us a couple names here in Trouba and especially Chris Kreider, which we will talk about, don't you worry, he also says that other options will be considered. There's a couple big names making big money on this Rangers team that aren't named Kreider or Trouba that I could easily see the Rangers wanting to deal. The first player to talk about, and the player that is the easiest to see potentially getting dealt, is Jacob Trouba, who of course was the closest to getting dealt this last offseason. With his full no trade clause, there was no deal that ended up happening, but the Rangers were close enough to a deal they ended up going to Trouba and asking him to waive. Nothing happened, of course, but a trade has been in the works for a while now. Let's just say one of the more physical defensemen in the NHL today. He's somebody that I think still has value out there, but I just think has never been up to the level the Rangers have needed him to be at, especially when you consider the cap bet that he's getting paid at $8 million. For this Rangers team, I think the defense is something they're going to want to overhaul quite a bit, and we'll get into that as well throughout this trade process. But in this kind of mini season retool, I think the Rangers are going to be focusing on the defense, and Trouba is the easiest one to see getting the boot. But of course, the big thing that could hold a Jacob Trouba deal from happening is his contract. The term ain't too bad making this deal for this year and next, but the cap hit is ultimately what's going to cause some problems. At $8 million, that is a heavy overpayment for this player at this stage. So that's going to mean either one of two things in a potential Trouba deal. One, that there's a big player salary coming back to the Rangers in a Trouba deal, or that there's some heavy salary retention. Unless it's a deal to Columbus or something, where it's for a pick and a prospect. That's one of the only teams out there I could actually see bringing on Trouba's contract and not really having any difficulties with it, at least for right now. But I think a lot of teams out there are not just going to want retained salary, they're going to need it to make a deal happen. But the big thing that changes the Trouba trade landscape is the movement in his trade clause, because beginning this season, it was dumbed down from a full no trade to a 15-team trade. So you have the opportunity for more than half the league for the Rangers to be able to trade Trouba to them and not have to ask any questions to Trouba, which I think is a pretty big bonus, considering the fact that I don't think Trouba wants to ever leave on his own volition. Now, that does limit the options out there, but one team I could see in the mix is the LA Kings, who are one of the few teams out there that have more than $8 million in cap space right now, and I think one of those teams that would really like to add a player like Trouba onto that defense, add some more physicality. I mean, that's what LA has always tried to add more of throughout this whole process. I mean, this last offseason, getting players like Warren Fogle and Tanner Jeannot, Trouba is right up that alley. The wrench in all this, though, is, of course, the Drew Doughty injury and the implications of that long term. How much of an injury is that for LA? Is it something where they still want to get a stopgap cap in the future? I'm not really sure there because, of course, Trouba is a right D. Doughty will likely play right D as well. And you would already have Gavrikov and Clark, who has solidified himself so far this year. So I'm not sure if the Rangers want to do that. Maybe they are fine with putting somebody on the left side. Maybe they are fine with putting a player like Clark on the left side, perhaps, or Doughty on the left side. Who knows? But if the Kings are allowed to be versatile, maybe they send another contract back, of course, with Doughty being on LTIR. I think the fit could be pretty interesting. But I think there's still a lot of cap complications that are problems here. Though, if it were a 50% retention and you have Trouba down to, $4 million, then I think this could be a lot simpler. The Kings have a couple fours that I could see potentially being dealt. Trevor Moore, though, makes the most sense, making $4.2 million. He's kind of always been in flux, I feel like, with LA's future and how they see him. But especially with the Rangers' need for speed, Moore would certainly fit that bill and could be used to make the cap situation work. But I think the Kings are one of those teams in a long line of teams that would need some retention to make this happen. Another team I could absolutely see being in the mix because they were last offseason is the Detroit Red Wings. Of course, that was the team that was rumored to be getting Trouba if Trouba were to waive his no move clause, but we ultimately did not see the deal and actually happening in the end. But I could still see Detroit 100% being interested. I mean, they love this specific type of defenseman that is completely overrated, but is on more of the defensive, physical side, and they brought in countless of those guys. I mean, Sherratt, Hall, Petrie over the years, and Trouba would be on a long line of those type of D. But I could absolutely see one of those D that Detroit has going back to the Rangers. I'm not sure which one they would really want. I think Sherratt is maybe the one that they would want the most, but if I'm them, I would not have any of those guys. I would not even be interested in talking about those players, but I think the Rangers might view it a little bit differently. Considering, I think, how much the Rangers might be retooling that left side as well on the defense, which we will get into in a second, I think Ben Sherratt honestly makes the most sense if any Detroit D were to be coming back, which I know isn't what Rangers fans want to hear, but I'm just trying to be realistic. In terms of who the Rangers could want to bring on, I think Sherratt makes sense. Now, I know I said the Rangers are most likely aren't going to be looking for picks and prospects, but the one team that I think that would be an exception for is the Columbus Blue Jackets, because especially considering the cap hit where the Blue Jackets are up around $20 million, I think if the Rangers looking for cap space in a Trouba deal, Columbus makes the most sense. On that right side, they already went from the waiver wire and acquired Dante Fabro, who's been really good for them so far, especially in a more offensive role. But I think on that right side, you could see them going for a Trouba-like and maybe trading a Harris or, of course, a David Jiricek, who has been heavily in trade rumors over the last couple weeks as he's been up and down in the NHL and AHL level. He's somebody I could see the Rangers having a lot of interest in as a more physical presence on the back end on the younger side too. I don't know how ready he is for a middle pair role the way that Trouba is playing right now, but I could absolutely see the Rangers having interest in a player like Jiricek and ultimately them getting a deal done. I think for a team like the Blue Jackets especially, who are in need of defense, they probably value Trouba a lot more than we do. But now going on to the second player that Elliotte Friedman mentioned, and this was the big surprise, Chris Kreider being on the trade block. You can see at 33 years old, making $6.5 million, he's somebody that I think has regressed quite a bit this season, and in a lot of ways, I think gets due to some unluckiness as well. But I think, especially with what we've seen out of Lafreniere and Cooley on that left side, we've seen Kreider's role kind of be diminished a little bit, and his importance to the Rangers team diminished a little bit. You can see in 19 games going for that Cy Young, 9 goals, 0 assists for 9 points. The overall game just hasn't quite been there, and the presence of Kreider hasn't quite been there, at least consistently. There's been the ups and downs, but this is one of the worst versions of Kreider where you don't really know what you're getting. But even just last season, he got 75 points, almost 40 goals in 82 games. This can still be a highly productive player, and I think, especially compared to Trouba, is an extremely easy player to move. Now, the contract situations aren't that dissimilar. Both have just 1 year left after this next season, and both have a 15-team no-trade list. But I think especially in Kreider's case, there's going to be a lot of interest. I think $6.5 million is a lot easier to move, especially for the player that Kreider can be. He's a little bit older at 33 years old, but I would not be surprised if he were to rebound for any team that trades for him, especially if you're looking for power play, bang and crash ability. Kreider is still one of the best out there. Now, honestly, I think almost every team out there is going to be acquiring about Kreider because I think he could be such a great fit on so many teams out there. The team I think is the best fit, but I just don't see it happening, is the Buffalo Sabres because of that no move clause. Even though it has been downgraded, it's still a 15-team no trade list, and I doubt that any player right now, if they had 15 teams to say no to, that the Buffalo Sabres wouldn't be on that list, which is a shame because I think he'd be perfect on that left side, especially for the power play ability as a veteran, as somebody that can just come in and so many ways. I mean, imagining Kreider on the same line with Tuck, those two guys would be monsters together. But again, because of that no trade list, I think it takes Buffalo off, unfortunately. One team though I think could be really sneaky in the Kreider negotiations is the Anaheim Ducks, especially with Pat Verbeek and the players that he likes to bring on. Kreider is right up that alley. I mean, we've seen Alex Killorn, especially, who's kind of the Kreider light at this stage in his career, but I think he would be an amazing fit in Anaheim, and especially considering some of the trade options they have on the wings in general. I think we could see a really interesting big deal here. I mean, Trevor Zegras has been somebody that has been rumored for so long now. Is this the chance for the Rangers to get Zegras in the end? I mean, that would be incredible. They could put him at the center position as well, bring some speed there, bring some skill. I think they do need up the middle. That could be interesting. They could also put him on the left side, of course, and try that out still and see a change of scenery in him. I think that would be best for Zegras, in all honesty. I think he thrives with the attention there in New York, and I think that could be exactly what the doctor ordered for both sides involved. And I don't know if I would do that if I'm the Ducks, and we'll see if they have more patience than that. If so, I mean, Frank Vatrano is right there as well, who, of course, former Ranger. He's been great in his time at Anaheim. Not this year, but the last couple of seasons, he's been a really underrated scorer there. He's something that I think the Rangers could also bring on for some speed. So I think for Anaheim, that's especially a team that the Rangers, I think, would want to negotiate with. And with the Ducks having $19 million in cap space, they want to get better. They want to improve and add some veteran leadership, and I think that's going to be the angle the Rangers try to attack them from to get some good young talent. Another team that has some good young players to deal is the Utah Hockey Club. Now, I'm not sure how desperate Utah is to really upgrade the forward position. That's something that will be a question to answer. If Utah, though, wants to still be making a push for the playoffs this season, if they aren't as patient as maybe we thought, Kreider, I think, could be really interesting, especially for that power play, and especially with how many younger players they have, especially on the playmaking side. I mean, imagine Cooley with Kreider. I think those two would be dynamic together. You already, of course, have Gunther on that line too, but that could just be a magical finishing pair. But I think for Utah, most likely than not, this is a trade that maybe would have to wait until next year for them, maybe as more of a rental, but we'll have to wait and see, especially considering some of those younger players there, like a Lawson Krause, especially, who I think the Rangers would really want to add. There's some options there. I'm just saying. Now, I said that there was a lot more players that I could see being dealt from the Rangers that weren't Kreider, weren't Trouba, and I wasn't lying, because I think especially on that defense, there's a couple of names that could be moved. Ryan Lindgren makes a lot of sense to me. He is somebody that has really regressed with the Rangers these last couple of years, and unfortunately so. He's been just an ultra defensive, physical defenseman for them for a long time now, but has just kind of lost his way in his effectiveness. He's somebody that, points-wise, has always been at a pretty consistent level, but in terms of defensive play, I think has lost his value by quite a bit, and could use a change of scenery. Now, in Lindgren's case, I don't see there really being any problem with trading him. He makes $4.5 million, no trade protection whatsoever, and considering how physical a defenseman he can be, the pedigree that he does have, deservedly so, and the cap hit that's pretty responsible, I see a lot of teams out there being interested in him, and him being somebody that just eventually goes by the wayside. And I think for the Rangers, it's a shame because, I mean, he still could have worked in the end, but I think the writing is on the wall. Now, the first team that I could see making a lot of sense for Lindgren is the St. Louis Blues, who I think would really appreciate Lindgren's physical style there. Now, Broberg is coming back soon, so of course he's going to be on that left side too, but I could easily see it being Suter, Broberg, and potentially Lindgren on that third pair, or you have Lindgren on that first pair, Parayko potentially. I think he could be up to that level if he's given the opportunity. I don't think for the Blues to get to revolutionize that defense or anything. I think a change of scenery would be nice for him, especially with the Blues going forward with Montgomery too. Maybe there's a new coach there that could get something out of him. Edmonton is also a team I wanted to give a shout out to, especially considering the lower cap hit on Lindgren's end. Maybe we see a swap between Kulak and Lindgren. Maybe the Rangers see something in Kulak that could be an improvement, perhaps. And I think especially with Kulak and just how responsible he can be at times, how IQ driven he is as well. Maybe that's a fit for the Rangers going forward. Maybe that type of swap, especially for the cap hits, would work especially well for the Oilers too. But we'll have to wait and see. There would have to be some finagling there. But two teams I think could stand to use some changes on that defense, and maybe some changes of scenery, and could work in the end. I also have to shout out to the Detroit Red Wings here. I mean, they're going to be going after Jacob Trouba, of course, but I think they're going to be going for any defenseman available. I think for the Red Wings, though, the lower age on Lindgren, I think, would be pretty enticing for them. Already having the pedigree and the physical talent there. I mean, we could just see a Lindgren for Sherratt type of swap. I would not be surprised about that, though I could see the Red Wings really benefiting from that in the end. I think they could stand to get a little bit younger on their defense, on top of players like Evanston and Sider, who are already bringing their best at young ages, but but Lindgren has brought a lot of playoff experience as well, and just at 26 years old, I mean, that could be valuable for the Wings. And even if it isn't Trouba going back the other way, you could have him in the place of Albert Johansson, who's been solid, but you could have Lindgren as an improvement there, and maybe that's something the Red Wings want to go after. Another D on this Rangers team I could see being dealt is K'Andre Miller, though personally, I would be a little bit more patient with him. In Lindgren's case, the decline has been pretty sad, but I think in K'Andre Miller's case, he's somebody that I think still has a lot of room to grow. I mean, he's 24 years old, and even though he's playing in the NHL for a while now, that's because he was so good and was progressing so well. There's been some growing pains and some really bad moments defensively this year. I will not deny that whatsoever, but I still think there is a lot of potential here as a puck-moving defenseman, as an overall D, and I would just hate for the Rangers to give up on him and have him flourish somewhere else, kind of like Jake Wallman with the Detroit Red Wings, like we saw this last offseason. If it were up to me, I would retool the defense in other ways. I'd get rid of Trouba, I'd get rid of Lindgren, and see still what I can make work with Miller, potentially getting him a new line mate, and I think getting him away from Jacob Trouba full-time could be something that benefits him in the end. We'll have to wait and see on that, but if the Rangers are going to retool, I would personally keep Miller, but also considering his age and considering how rough he's been defensively this year, I would also not be surprised to see him dealt. But a 24-year-old puck-moving 6'5" defenseman, sure, there have been flaws in his game this season, but man, teams would be all over this guy, as they should. Now, the one player I wanted to talk about here that I do not think has his job safe, maybe he has it safe because of his contract, but still, I think especially the Kreider trade rumors should really be feeling the pressure, and that is Mika Zibanejad. I am just so disappointed by how Zibanejad's game has been progressing over these last 2 years. I mean, he's never been this unbelievable 5-on-5 player or anything. He's always been this unbelievable power play quarterback who can score from any position, but we've just seen such a regression in everything with Zibanejad. He's no longer this dynamic power play force or anything. He still has his good offensive moments, but I mean, you could see the dip in production since 2023, going from 91 points to 72 points, and this year, just 4 goals, 14 points in 19 games. The goal scoring has really taken some major steps back, and it is very worrying to me. I mean, the Rangers are a team that already isn't as fast as they need to be, isn't as good 5-on-5 as they need to be, yet you have your number one center, who is honestly one of the worst number one centers 5-on-5 in the entire league. And I think the Rangers need to accept that. And honestly, if I were New York, I would be doing everything possible to trade this guy. I just don't think he is it as your first line center on a Stanley Cup winning team. And I think the quicker the Rangers accept that, the quicker they'll get better. The big problem, and say it with me, is the contract. It's not necessarily the cap hit, because I think at 8.5, there are teams out there that I think could potentially stomach that, and with some salary retention would be perfectly fine with bringing on that AAV, but you have the full no move clause, which really brings a rough spot here, because it doesn't really change until 2020 or 2030, so it's a pretty far ways away from actually changing whatsoever, and that's in the last year of his contract. So if any Zibanejad trade were to happen, he would have to accept that deal, which I honestly don't really see happening. It seems like Zibanejad is kind of fine with the status quo of the Rangers, which is kind of the problem in his own rights, but it would have to go through Zibanejad, which I think is the major problem here. He's not accepting a trade to Anaheim or something. It's just not happening, and I could see a situation where it's like Trouba, where a trade potentially formulates and it just doesn't happen because Zibanejad says no, and there's only so much Rangers can do because of how strapped they are. If I was them, I would do everything possible to convince Zibanejad that it would be good for him, but that's a hard task to do. So in a lot of ways, this Rangers potential retool throughout the season is a little bit limited, but I think there's a lot of options here to get faster, to get quicker, to get younger, and I think that would benefit the Rangers in the end. I think this is a team that really needs to improve 5-on-5 on really both offense and defense. There are a lot of issues with the team that I think can be corrected after this year, but especially with Igor Shesterkin's contract and everything, I do not envy the position that Chris Drury has put himself in, because there are a lot of decisions, and tough ones, that the Rangers are going to be making very, very soon. But I'd love your thoughts down below on this potential Rangers retool. Which trades do you see happening? Which players do you see being dealt? Where do you see them going? What do you think the trades will look like? And do you want your team to trade for any of these Rangers players, both in the forward group and the defense? I would love to hear your thoughts down below. And of course, if you guys did enjoy the trade rumor breakdown, make sure you hit that subscribe button for more videos just like this. And of course, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button as well. And share the video with all the hockey fans you guys know online, and click on this card for all of my hockey content, all my hockey trade content in one playlist. And I will see you guys in the next one. Also, of course, make sure you sign up to BetUS today using code U2150. And I will see you guys in the next one, y'all. Have a great hockey day, and goodbye.